Okay, we are recording, so please try to minimize the sound in the room, Haley. But if you look at this, when you look at, stop now. If you look at a pedigree, your males are going to be shown by a square. The females are shown by a circle. And if they have a genetic disorder or they have the condition, they will be shaded in. So when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I had to go see a genetic counselor. And they wanted to put together a pedigree to see if I had a family history of breast cancer. And it was a little bit of a problem because my mom's an only girl with 3 brothers, which yes, men can still get breast cancer, but she was the only daughter. Her mom had a breast cancer, but at like 87. Well, if you lived long enough in your life, you're going to have a breast tumor. Like, it's just the way it goes. And then my dad was an only child. So my pedigree didn't have a whole lot to fill in and to look for. When we put a line between the boy and the girl, it means they are mating. Okay, they are making babies. And then there's a drop down with a crossbar. And anything that's attached to that drop down with the crossbar, those are their children. So like this guy and this girl mated a couple times here and had a daughter and a son, is what that means.
Why are the twins mating?
Our twin, of course you would laugh. Our twins are not mating. What this is saying is that the diagonal line shows that they are identical twins, because identical twins, when sperm and egg come together and they start, it's one cell to start off with, and then it divides into 2 and 2 into 4. And somewhere very early on, like literally a chunk of it kind of breaks off. And it's so early on in development and specialization of cells that it grows into 2 separate babies, genetically identical. They have the same DNA. These are not identical twins. So they're born at the same time, but I always say this is like sister and brother that just happened to be in the uterus at the same time. And what happened was, in that ovulation cycle, mom released 2 eggs into the uterus, and they're not even there yet, but she releases 2 eggs from the ovaries that month, and then 2 separate sperm fertilize the 2 separate eggs and 2 babies. Literally brother and sister. They just happen to be growing at the same time. All sorts of fun stuff in this unit, and that's all coming up, so just hold on. Okay, so we call these pedigrees. Lord, I'm on the wrong page. I want page 2. Okay, the first thing to do here is, and I'm only going to go through dominant and recessive today. The first thing to do is to recognize whether or not they are dominant or recessive. And if I look at this, oh, now my pen's not on. Sorry, Hope. If I look at this, these are labeled, we're looking at the dominant right now. There's a generation 1, a generation 2, and a generation 3. So in generation 1, you have grandpa and grandma. Grandma's carrying the disease or has the disease. And then in generation 2, they have 3 boys. One of their sons gets married, and they have 3 daughters. When you look at this, you kind of divide them into these lines. And because they're shading in generation 1, and they're shading in generation 2 and 3, when you see shading in every generation, we call it dominant. And I know the word dominant's there, but write it again. Write what I write. Joshy, write what I write. Chasey. Okay, and after you do that, you scribble. That means dominant is shaded. What? You don't have something to write with, Joshy?
Yep.
Yep. You can come up here and leave me your shoe, and you can take a pen.
Okay.
I get a boot?
I'll take this.
Okay, but you didn't leave me your boot.
No.
Well, then give me my pen back. You guys have to realize they've cleaned out my drawer in my office. 4th hour, 6 people ask every day for a pen. Like, I have none left because they just keep taking them and eating them or whatever they do with them. Okay, dominant. How do you write a dominant genotype? What kind of letter is it? It's a capital. So they are either going to get big A, or big A, little a. Which means that the non-shaded squares or circles are going to get little a, little a. So now we go over to this pedigree, and we are going to label. Remember I said the non-shaded ones are getting little a, little a. So we're going to put 2 little a's on all of those. Now, when you inherit alleles, you inherit 1 from your mom and you inherit 1 from your dad. So let's look in generation 2 at this boy in the middle. He's shaded, so he has to have a big A. But what is the only thing that his dad up on top can give to him? A little a. Good. So we know the genotype of that boy in generation 2 has to be big, little. Let's go way over to the right side. I'm going to start writing in green. These 2 girls have 2 little a's. 1 came from dad. Where'd the other one come from? Mom. But mom is shaded, so what is her other letter? Big A. Big A. That doesn't sound good either. No matter what letter I choose. Okay, let's go down in generation 3 to this girl at the bottom. She's shaded. She has to have what letter for sure? Big A. And what's the only thing her father could have given her? Little a. A little a. So we can fill that one in. So it's kind of like putting pieces to the puzzle together. You either have to look above or below to see what's being inherited. Now let's go way up to grandma on the top. She had 3 boys. 2 of them have little a, little a. 1 came from their dad. Where'd the other one come from? From mom. So this boy right here got this little a from dad. The other one had to come from mom. But she's shaded, so she's got a big A, little a. Okay? Now this is different than if you go down to the bottom and we look at recessive pedigrees. The reason it's recessive is because if you look at the 3 generations, there's nothing shaded in generation 1. It's completely blank. But then all of a sudden the disease comes back. So that means like it was hiding somewhere in that carrier gene, and then it comes back in future generations. So when you do this, you write the word recessive, and that means because it's a recessive pedigree, that recessive will be shaded. And if I'm using A's, how do I write a recessive genotype? Little a, little a. Which that just tells me that little a is going to go on all of the shaded ones. Here, and here, and here. Let's go way up to grandma and grandpa up on the top. They're not shaded. Which means if they're not shaded, they have to have 1 big A for sure. But they had this son here in generation 2, right here, with 2 little A's. He got 1 little A from dad and 1 from mom. So therefore, we know that a little a goes on each of them. Let's do the same thing down in generation 3, looking at this one right here. 1 little a came from mom, the other one came from dad. But he's not shaded, so he gets a big A, little a. Now we're going to kind of work the opposite direction. Looking at this mom right here by the blue arrow, what's the only thing she can offer to her kids? She only has a little a. So clearly these have to have a little a. But if they're not shaded, what's their other letter? Big A, little a for both. Okay, now we're gonna go to generation 2. Right here on the left side. That boy. The only thing we know is that he's not shaded. And that tells us he has to have what first letter? Big A. Is there any way that I can say, okay, well, let's say he got his big A from his dad. How do we know what he got from mom? Because if he gets a big A, he's still gonna be unshaded. If he has big A, her little a, he's still unshaded. So we can't tell what that one is, and when that happens, you just put a hyphen behind it. Copies? All right, so this is the worksheet packet that you are going to work on. Okay, you have to fill in all the genotypes for all the different shades and shapes and everything throughout the packet. When you're finished, you come up and I give you one pedigree to fill in. You don't know if it'll be dominant or recessive. I'm not gonna give you a sex-linked one. Those get a little more complicated. So you have the worksheet packet and the quiz, and then remember, I have the note sheet for chapter 8 printed off on paper, if you want it on paper, or it's in a PDF, and there's 3 videos that go with that one as well. Questions? All right, let's do it.